A true story. Real dark files. I am not someone who scares easily. I have walked alone at 3 a.m. through empty streets. I have stood in complete darkness without flinching. I have heard strange sounds in the night and always found a rational explanation until I moved into that apartment. It was a small 3-story building in a tiny village in rural France, surrounded by fields and forest. The kind of place where nothing ever happens. The kind of place where you feel safe. I moved in during early 2023. Ground floor apartment. Quiet building, quiet life. Very quickly, I noticed something about the neighbors upstairs. They were completely silent. You could sometimes hear their footsteps, barely. But every single day without fail, at exactly 3 p.m., they played the accordion. Always the same song, always the same time. Never before, never after. It became the soundtrack of my days. Honestly, they played beautifully. I never met them. Never saw them. Just heard that one song every afternoon at 3 p.m. like clockwork. For months, that was my normal. Then one day in November, silence. No accordion. Nothing. I assumed they had moved out. Tenants in that building never stayed long. A few days later, I started hearing furniture moving in the evenings, late in the evenings. I told myself new tenants had arrived and were settling in. I told myself that. I believed that. I was wrong. A few weeks after the accordion stopped, I was lying in bed at 12:30 a.m. when I heard it. Sobbing. Not from the hallway, not from outside, from directly above my head. So clear, so close, as if someone was crying in the same room as me. I got up. I walked to the other side of my apartment. The sobbing became muffled, almost gone. I walked back to my bed, crystal clear again, right above me. Someone was crying in their bedroom, directly above mine. I told myself it was the old building, poor insulation, strange acoustics. I took my dog and went for our usual late-night walk. And that is when I saw it. For the first time in months, the living room of the upstairs apartment was lit. It was past midnight. The entire building was dark, every window black, except that one. And standing completely still in front of the window, a silhouette, dark, motionless, pressed against the glass. I stood across the street and watched it for several minutes. I even shone my flashlight in its direction multiple times, directly at it. No reaction, nothing, just that dark shape, completely still, staring out into the night. I continued my walk. I told myself it was nothing. A person standing at their window at midnight, strange, but not impossible. But when I came back an hour and a half later, it was still there. Same position, same stillness, same darkness. I entered my building, and the moment I stepped into that hallway, everything changed. I have walked through dark corridors at 3 a.m. my entire life without a second thought. I am not afraid of the dark. I am not afraid of silence. I am not afraid of empty spaces at night. But that hallway, something was wrong. Not a sound, not a shadow, nothing I could point to and say, there, that is what is frightening me. Just a feeling, deep in my chest, ancient and primal. Something is here. Something is between me and my door, and it is getting closer. Even my dog, who has never once hesitated on our late-night walks, pressed her body against my legs and refused to move forward. My apartment door was 3 feet from the bottom of the staircase. 3 feet. It felt like miles. I have never moved so fast in my life. Key already in hand, I crossed that hallway in one movement and jammed the key into the lock. And in that single second between the key going in and the lock turning, I felt something directly behind me. Not heard, not seen, felt. I slammed the door, both locks, my back pressed against the wood, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Standing in the dark of my own apartment, listening, silence. Only when I was certain both locks were secured did my body finally release. A long, slow breath, adrenaline leaving my hands and legs all at once. I did not sleep that night. The next day, I told my roommate everything. He did not believe me. A few weeks later, my downstairs neighbor stopped me in the parking lot. She asked me if I had noticed anything unusual about the upstairs apartment. I had not told her anything. I had told no one. She told me about the furniture moving at night, the sobbing. Her and her husband had complained directly to the upstairs neighbors, who told them it was not them, that they heard the same noises coming from the apartment across the hall. Then she asked me, "Have you ever actually seen anyone in that apartment?" I told her about the silhouette. She went pale. She had seen it too. Except she had seen it at 4 p.m. in broad daylight. And when she had approached the building, it had started screaming and slamming against the window with both hands. She ran to her car and locked herself inside and watched that dark shape moving against the glass until her husband arrived. They called the rental agency. The agency told them the apartment had been empty for months. It had not been rented to anyone. There was no tenant. There had been no tenant for a very long time. I moved out in early 2025. On our last day, apartment completely empty. I was waiting outside by the car while my roommate finished with the moving truck. I looked up at the building, and there it was, half hidden behind a blanket hung over the bedroom window, that same dark silhouette, watching us, watching everything we were doing, still, patient, silent. After a few minutes, it withdrew slowly back behind the blanket, and then the accordion started playing. The same song, the same melody I had heard every day for months, and then not heard for months more. I stood completely frozen in the parking lot. My roommate came back. I asked him, "Do you hear that?" He said yes. He said the neighbor must have started practicing again. Then he got in the car. I stood there alone and listened until the song ended. And when the last note faded into the cold morning air, I got in the car and we drove away. I have never gone back. I do not know what was in that apartment. I do not know what watched us from that window for months. I do not know what stood in that hallway the night it felt like death itself was 3 feet behind me. All I know is this: whatever it was, it waited until we were leaving to say goodbye. And somehow, that is the part that frightens me the most.